Haven Arrest Missionary Baptist Church presents Union Gospel Presses Sunday School Lesson number 12, Sunday, November 22nd, 2020. The lesson is entitled Moses' Audacious Request. Lesson text comes from Exodus chapter 33, verses 12 through 23. Related scriptures are Isaiah 43, 1 through 7, John 1, 1 through 5, and 14 through 18, Romans 4, 13 through 25. The place is Mount Sinai. The time is 1445 BC. One of the problems we must deal with as teachers of the Word of God is that so many of the concepts we teach seem abstract. One of the most challenging ones is the concept of God's appearance. We are made in His image. This mainly concerns our spiritual, moral, and ethical attributes. Being made in God's image does not mean God shares our physical appearance. Be prepared for off-the-wall questions and ideas to surface during this lesson. Remember, we all tend to have curious misconceptions in this area, but if we entertain unbiblical ideas, we risk leaving people with false ideas about God. It is better to say, "I don't know," and then promise to offer a better answer at a later time after taking the time to study what the Bible has to say on the issue. Today's aim, facts, to see what Moses was asking of God and how he answered. Principle, to realize that spending time with God helps us pray more in line with His will. Application, to make seeing God's glory the driving ambition of our life. Illustrating the lesson. Although we cannot see God's face now, we should desire to see more and more of His glory in Christ. Practical points. 1. God reveals His plan in His way and on His schedule, Exodus 33:12. 2. Prayer is more about seeking to know the God who blesses us than about seeking His blessings, verse 13. 3. God's presence with believers identifies them as His own, verses 14 through 16. 4. God's plan for each of His people is that they seek His glory and His presence in their daily lives, verses 17 through 18. 5. God reveals His goodness through His works in and around His people, verses 19 through 20. 6. At present, sin blocks people from seeing God as He really is, verses 21 through 23. Golden text. And He said, "Thou canst not see my face, for there shall no man see me and live." Exodus 33:20. Today we have 3 lesson outlines. The first is God's way, Exodus 33:12 through 14. The second is God's presence, Exodus 33:15 through 17. And the third is God's glory, Exodus 33:18 through 23. Introduction. Plans often change. Sometimes this is because circumstances change. We change our vacation plans because of sickness in the family or a hurricane threatening the coast where we were planned to stay. At other times, our plans change because we or others change. We decide not to pursue a new business opportunity simply because we have lost interest in it or other interests have replaced it. And sometimes we change our plans because we have rethought things and redetermined that our original plans were unrealistic or too costly. God's plans are very different. He knows all things, including circumstances we cannot foresee. He does not need to rethink His decisions, for they are the result of perfect knowledge and His holy character. And His plans are not derailed by our failures or inconsistencies. While He may seem to change His mind at times because of our actions, we understand that this apparent change is really a part of His original plan. This truth gives us assurance that the Lord's plans for us are sure and steady in moving forward. Yet He knows that in our weakness, we sometimes need reassurance. This is also true of godly servants such as Moses. God's way. Exodus 33:12. And Moses said unto the Lord, See, thou sayest unto me, Bring up these people, and thou hast not let me know whom thou wilt send with me. Yet thou hast said, I know thee by name, and thou hast also found grace in my sight. Verse 13. Now therefore I pray thee, if I have found grace in thy sight, show me now thy way, that I may know thee, that I may find grace in thy sight, and consider that this nation is thy people. Verse 14. And he said, My presence shall go with thee, and I will give thee rest. Moses' request, Exodus 33:12-13. Having dealt with the people's idolatry at Sinai, the Lord told Moses to take them up into the land he had promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and their descendants. However, the Lord warned that because of the nation's stubborn sinfulness, he would not go up in the midst of the people, lest he destroy them. Verse 13. The people responded by demonstrating a repentant attitude, verses 4-6, and as we shall see, the Lord agreed to go up with them in response to Moses' prayer. Exodus 33:7-11 describes the tabernacle or tent of meeting Moses set up outside the camp. The official movable tabernacle had not yet been erected. It would reside in the midst of the camp wherever the Israelites were in camp. The tent mentioned here was a temporary structure where Moses met with the Lord, who spoke to him from a pillar of cloud. Apparently, this information is given here because this is where Moses met with the Lord to offer his petitions in verses 12-23. Moses knew the Lord had called him to lead this people, had promised his presence and direction, and had made the people his own. Because of the idolatrous rebellion described in chapter 32, however, it seems Moses needed assurance that God's plan for his people was still in effect. Although the Lord had given assurance that he would give the promised land to Israel, Moses was concerned because he had indicated he would not be in their midst. 33:3. Moses' initial request centered on who actually would be going with them. Verse 12. He noted that the Lord had told him to take the people up to the promised land, but he also stated, Thou hast not let me know whom thou wilt send with me. The Lord had said that instead of accompanying them himself, he would send an angel before them to drive out the inhabitants of Canaan. Verse 2. Apparently, this was not the angel of his presence, Isaiah 63:9, promised earlier, Exodus 23:20-23, but another angelic being. Moses' prayer then may have related to the identity of this angel. However, it may have been a somewhat veiled response to God's presence to remain among the people as they move forward. Moses also reminded the Lord that he had found grace or undeserved favor in God's sight. The Lord knew him by name, meaning he had chosen him. Since this was the case, Moses asked the Lord to show him his way. 33:13. He wanted to know more specifically what God had in store for the nation and for their guidance. He wanted to know God better and continue to find grace before the Lord. Moses also entreated the Lord to consider that Israel was his chosen people. On this basis, he was asking the Lord to be gracious to them. God's reply, Exodus 33:14. The Lord's answer was indeed gracious. The angel that would go before them to drive out their enemies, verse 2, would indeed be the angel of his presence, for his presence would go with them, verse 14. It is likely the angel was in fact the angel of the Lord, 3:2. That is God the Son, the second person of the Trinity. The Lord's presence, literally his face, would guarantee the people rest and blessing in the land to which God was giving them. God's presence. Verse 15. And he said unto him, If thy presence go not with me, carry us not up hence. Verse 16. For wherein shall it be known here that I and thy people have found grace in thy sight? Is it not in that thou goest with us? So shall we be separated, I and thy people, from all the people that are upon the face of the earth. Verse 17. And the Lord said unto Moses, I will do this thing also that thou hast spoken, for thou hast found grace in my sight, and I know thee by name. Moses' request, Exodus 33:15 through 16. The Lord's promised presence with his people initiated another request from Moses. If thy presence go not with me, carry us not up hence, may appear to express doubt or sound demanding. However, Moses was not pleading for God to do what he had already promised, but rather was seeking confirmation of God's promised presence with him and Israel's chosen leader. He also wanted confirmation that Israel was still God's chosen people, distinct from all others. Moses understood that God's presence and favor were manifested outwardly to the world. By the time they had endured the 10 plagues, the Egyptians were convinced that the Lord was with the Israelites. Moses wanted all to know that the Lord favored Israel as his own people. He sought reassurance of God's presence with both him and Israel as they set out from Sinai, such that it would be evident both to Israel and to Israel's enemies that the Lord's favor rested upon his people. Moses understood from past experiences this kind of challenges that lay ahead. Only the Lord manifested his power in and through Israel would his reputation be preserved and people be encouraged to continue on toward the land of promise. We might find it easy to fault Moses for seeking confirmation of God's promise, but we must understand his situation. He was leading a people who had repeatedly challenged both his leadership and the Lord himself. They were, by God's own estimation, a stiff-necked people. Verse 3. We can certainly grasp why Moses sought reassurance from the Lord, but was this wrong? We must not miss the fact that the Lord did not rebuke Moses for his request, but graciously answered him. In fact, it appears the Lord invited his petitions and was pleased to grant them. Prayer is a reflection of one's relationship with the Lord. Moses' relationship with the Lord was like that of friend to friend, verse 11. When we know God, walk by faith, and live in purity before him, we can speak to him intimately without fear of rebuke or rejection. This does not mean all our requests will be granted, but it does mean we come honestly before him, even with our weaknesses and doubts, and know that he welcomes us into his presence. God's reply, Exodus 33:17. The Lord again answered Moses affirmatively. He promised to do exactly what his servant had requested. He would indeed go with Moses and his people and manifest his power and guidance. The basis for granting the request was that Moses had found grace in his sight and that the Lord knew him by name. Moses' plea earlier had been on the basis of these same two blessings, verses 12 through 13. Now the Lord assured him that he was indeed the recipient of his grace and that he knew Moses by name. Moses enjoyed a very special relationship with the Lord, and it was because of this, not because of the Israelites as a whole, that he granted the request. Israel benefited immensely from the faithful intercession of Moses. Indeed, their continued existence as a nation was the result of his prayers. 32:9 through 14. God's mercy works together with our prayers to accomplish great things for others, even if those people are unaware that we are praying for them. God's glory. Verse 18. And he said, I beseech thee, show me thy glory. Verse 19. And he said, I will make all my goodness pass before thee, and I will proclaim the name of the Lord before thee, and will be gracious to whom I will be gracious, and will show mercy on whom I will show mercy. Verse 20. And he said, Thou canst not see my face, for there shall no man see me and live. Verse 21. And the Lord said, Behold, there is a place by me, and thou shalt stand upon the rock. Verse 22. And it shall come to pass, while my glory passes by, that I will put thee in a cleft of the rock, and will cover thee with my hand while I pass by. Verse 23. And I will take away mine hand, and thou shalt see my back parts, but my face shall not be seen. Moses' request, Exodus 33:18. Moses' third request is described by John Davis as almost without parallel in human history up to this point. He asked God to show him his glory. This was a very personal request, but what exactly was Moses requesting? God's glory usually refers to a physical manifestation of his presence. Moses had seen God's glory in the cloud, 16:7 and 10. He had entered into the glory cloud on the mountain, 19:9, 24:15 through 18. And the Lord spoke to him from the cloud of his glory, 33:9 through 11. He and others had even seen some form of the cloud previously, 24:10. Clearly, Moses was seeking a deeper revelation of God that went beyond anything he had witnessed before. The previous manifestations of God's glory had been witnessed by others and were given by God apart from any request. Now Moses sought something more and personal, a greater perception of God's essential being. Such a revelation could confirm God's continuing presence and work in his life and encourage him as he led the people on to the promised land. God's reply, Exodus 33:19 through 20. Again, God said he would grant Moses' request. He would do so by making his goodness pass before Moses. Goodness refers to the moral perfection of God. Psalms 119:68 tells us God is good and does good. His very character is summed up in his goodness, which in some way would be manifested visibly so that the splendor of his presence would be known to Moses. This visible revelation would be accompanied by the Lord's own proclamation of his name. The name of the Lord refers to his character or nature. So God's character would be expressed visibly by his goodness passing before Moses and described verbally in terms of his grace and mercy. To be gracious is to show favor, and to show mercy is to have a deep, tender feeling of compassion or love for another. The Hebrew terms both generally speak of the actions of a superior toward an inferior. The combination of this powerful visible revelation and the words of the Lord would give Moses a unique vision and understanding of God. This divine revelation would sustain him through the many years to come as he led the people from Sinai to the brink of the promised land. While Moses was assured that his request to see God's glory would be granted shortly, he was told that this amazing revelation would be limited. Thou canst not see my face, the Lord said, for there shall no man see me and live. Exodus 33:20. While Moses would see that which no one else saw, he would not see God's face, that is, God in his fullness. One commentator offers a helpful illustration. As our bodily eye is dazzled and its power of vision destroyed by looking directly at the brightness of the sun, so would our whole nature be destroyed by an unveiled sight of the brilliancy of the glory of God. Only when we are transformed into the perfect likeness of Christ will we see the Lord in the fullness of his glory. God's explanation, Exodus 33:21 through 23. The Lord went on to explain to Moses exactly what would happen. At a certain place on the mountain, Moses would stand upon a rock, and when the Lord's glory passed by, he would put Moses in a cleft or crevice. There, The Lord would shield him from seeing his face, but would allow him to see his back parts. The image of God's hand covering and then uncovering Moses' eyes is simply a figurative way of saying the Lord would control what Moses saw and did not see. God would graciously protect Moses from the instant death that would come from seeing the face of God in all his glory. However, Moses would see the back of God's manifested glory. This would be translated as the after effects of his radiant glory, which had just passed by. The fulfillment of Moses' request is described in Exodus 34, and it follows precisely the manner the Lord described in chapter 33. As the Lord's glory passed by, Moses and the Lord proclaimed his name. Interestingly, the text, which was penned by Moses, does not tell what Moses saw, but only what he heard. What he saw probably could not be adequately described, but what he heard could and was put into words. Words we can grasp and meditate on. God identified himself as compassionate, gracious, patient, faithful, truthful, giving, and just. 34:5-7. Moses had seen these aspects of God's character already. Now he was assured the same God with the same character would carry forth his plan to take the Israelites into their land under his leadership. We would do well to meditate on the mercy and grace of God as well as his other attributes. As we do so, we will be motivated to follow him wholeheartedly and love him fully. We will be assured that he can and will use us regardless of past failures, and we will look with great anticipation to the day when we will see him face to face. Questions. 1. Why did Moses need assurance that God's plan for his people was still in effect? 2. On what basis did Moses make his first request? 3. What would the Lord's presence with Israel guarantee them? 4. Of what did Moses seek confirmation in his second request? 5. Was it wrong for Moses to seek confirmation of what God had already promised? Explain. 6. On what basis did God grant Moses the second request? 7. What was Moses seeking when he asked to see God's glory? 8. How did God say Moses' third request would be granted? 9. What limitations was placed on seeing the glory of God? 10. What did Moses actually witness on the mountain in response to his petition? This concludes the Sunday School lesson for Sunday, November 22nd, 2020. Thank you for listening. God bless.